Hello, I'm Simon Blake, and this is Just About Coping. For our final episode of the series, I was delighted to be joined over Zoom by Linda Aiello, Executive Vice President, Employee Success Business Partner at Salesforce. For those of you who don't know, Salesforce is an international software company which provides one of the world's leading customer relationship management services. Salesforce regularly features in best places to work lists around the world, and for the last 3 years, Linda has been one of the key drivers behind this and customer satisfaction. We talked about the importance of trust in the workplace and why this has become even more prominent in the current climate. We talked about transparency and authenticity in leadership around decisions, the power of data and how we could use it to improve equality, diversity and well-being within the workplace, and why Ohana, which is the Hawaiian word for family, is at the heart of the Salesforce workplace culture. As I mentioned last week, our conversation took place remotely, so apologies if there's a little drop-off in our sound quality. I'm sure you will all understand. So this is what happened when I spoke to Linda. Linda Aiello, thank you so much for coming and talking. This is the first podcast that I've done via Zoom, so thank you for going on this journey with me. If you could just tell us in 5 words or phrases, how would you best describe yourself? What would those words or phrases be, and why?
Sure. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, Simon. Thank you so much. I'm used to doing my days on Zoom, so this doesn't change my life for me very much. I just get to do it from my couch instead of an office somewhere in the world. But in terms of words that describe me, I think it's really linked to my values. So my first one is relationships. And I'm a person who's lived around the world. I've moved country multiple times. This year, I'm actually going to do it twice because everybody loves to move country twice in 1 year. But my relationships are how I operate in life. And it's the family that I was born into, which is a wonderful one. And it's also the family that I've created in each of the places to which I've moved, and also my family at work. And I do my work very much through relationships as well. I would say the second one is influence. And I think, when we use our abilities to influence people and make things happen in that way rather than forcing things and pushing things, I find the adoption is better. How people live it organically is so much better. The third one is courage. And this is the one that can get me in trouble sometimes, I think. It's the piece that you almost wish wasn't there, but I can't quite help myself. I definitely believe in a world where sort of kindness and caring for each other is actually going to bring us to a better place. And also, fighting for the things that matter is very, very important. And I will. My team has seen me do it. I will fall on a sword for certain things if need be. I think the fourth one is joy. And that's one that actually my team assigned to me when I was talking through the values with them. And they said, we think you're missing one. And it's joy. And I do find joy in all of the small successes, all of the learnings that we have, the sort of unique times that are going on right now. Even there's some wonderful things that are coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic. And I love that. And I would say it's sort of, a creature of the world. And you can tell by my accent, I'm American. I find it a compliment when someone tells me I'm the least American they know. And I've spent my time living overseas the past 8 years, but I grew up traveling internationally a lot. And I find that our greatest learnings are when we really invest in other people's cultures and communities. And you learn so much about the world, but so much more about yourself in those moments. Some great words. And I guess the one which really strikes me at the moment is courage. That we, rightly are really clear that there will be a negative impact of COVID-19, but there's also, great courage to be taken from how well people have adapted and how much people have adapted, how quickly. And I think, it's really important that we focus on that, as much as the negative impacts, if we're really going to mobilise and recover and move through it really well. It's a funny thing, you know, I think people sometimes don't realize how much they have inside of themselves and how capable they are of adaptation and of changing, and their agility, et cetera, that's there. And there's a fear that's usually associated with that, with change, with something that's different, with something that's unusual, with something that's scary that's happening in the world. And there's scary things that are happening all the time in the world and in life. And we're forced to face it in this moment. So it's great to see the strength that so many people have and that everyone really has innately, and how they're able to bring that forward and live that at this moment.
And I guess that key bit is that actually we're so good at comparing ourselves to each other that when everybody is in similar situations, how we actually can take inspiration and dig deep, because actually everybody's having to do so at the same time.
For sure.
So just to talk a bit about the My Whole Self campaign. We started the campaign when we were in the office, and I think the really key bit of that was, in the context of being professional, that how we are able to take our whole self to work, and to be able to express that without fear of retribution or judgment, really enables us to sort of live at the end of our creative zone, if you like, and move into new innovation. But obviously, it's no longer the case at the moment that many of us are working from home. I guess it'd just be interested what you've learnt in your role about employees taking their whole self to work during this time, so much more than what you physically do and much more about the mindset.
For sure. And that, it's quite a time, but I actually love these moments, and these Zoom calls are the joy of my day because I get to see people in their sort of natural habitat, as it may be. I had a call the other day, and I did kind of my whole team, and I did a split call, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. In the afternoon call, there were 78 people on from all around the world. And there was someone holding her son in the US who was eating an orange, skin and all, on the call. A woman in Germany who was rocking her daughter to sleep. I've seen the rear end of someone's cat and dog in the screen. And you get an insight into people's lives, and it just brings us back to that spot where it reminds us that at the center of it all, we are all human. And I do think that that's actually a positive that's going to come out of that. And there's definitely that fear that people have at first. Oh my gosh, my place is small. What if there's a noise? What if my kid runs into the room? What if my buzzer rings? What if? And it's okay. That's life. That's what it is. That's what happens. And if it's not your kid running into your office, for me, if I'm at the office, it's an executive running into the office, which is, just about the same. But when we really thought about how to adapt to the situation that nobody's experienced before, as a company, we really referred right back to our number one value, which is trust. And this is why many people join Salesforce, and it's a huge part of the reason why people stay at Salesforce. And people are really clear, and they understand that they're being taken care of. That we are doing everything possible to take care of them through this time, give them whatever space they need in terms of that adaptation, give as many tools as we can, as much support that we can, so that they can also take care of their customers. But when we look at our response to this, the number one focus that we have in our sort of strategy around the response, and this is publicly available to all of our employees, is around health and safety. So they know that they can prioritize the safety and the health of themselves and their families, the people they're caring for, above everyone else, which I think makes it a little bit easier for them to know where their priorities are. We're a company that really always embraces radical transparency, but this has kind of brought it to a whole new level. And it's around why decisions are being made, how decisions are being made, to help people understand this and to really communicate with our employees. And we didn't get this perfectly right at first. And of course, things happened really quickly. I've been sort of on the response for this since the 21st of January when it first started hitting our teams in APAC. And at first we were putting out notifications, employee communications, every time something happened, which means that then if you're the person on the receiving side, you have this moment of fear when you're clicking that link of, oh God, what happened? What's the next piece that's going to go? But we started to say, okay, let's actually make sure we have a really single, reliable source of truth that people can go to so they can be reassured and have all of the resources we have in the same place, so that everyone's going. So actually now we have an email that we push out every day. We use data that we're capturing in the background through some employee surveys, some pulse surveys, through Chatter, which is our internal messaging tool and communication tool, to be able to understand what people are worried about and thinking about and make sure we're feeding the content in terms of that. And I think, this learning piece, we're very open about the fact that we're all learning. So even the leaders are learning. We have a global all hands call that happens every week, every Wednesday afternoon. And it's our executive team that are on there from home in their different spots, kids coming on camera every once in a while, same as everyone else. And they're there, and it's a very reassuring moment. But one of the things we've been very open about in our response to this is we are making an absolutely enormous amount of decisions at this time, and in an unprecedented environment. And we're going to get some of them wrong. And it's okay. And we're going to adapt, and we're going to fix it, and we're going to do the right thing. So generating that level of trust with our employees that if we get it wrong, we will course correct, and also giving them the space to also maybe have a hiccup or fail a little bit during this time and knowing it's okay. And then I'd say the last point, and I talked a little bit about prioritization. We use a planning tool for our business every year called the V2 MOM, and it stands for Vision, Values, Methods, Obstacles, Metrics. And we do this for each employee does theirs, but then for big projects. So we did one for our COVID-19 response. And that's where I was saying we published that and we put, health and safety first. And then the second piece is around our employees' well-being and all of the different benefits, the adaptations that we're doing from that point in time to be able to do that. So it's really making sure that people have that opportunity to do their work as their authentic self, and to actually see a lot of other leaders and a lot of people doing it. And the questions have been great on the all hands call, where people, some of them are very serious around certain responses to, what are we doing about hospitalized employees? And I'm really struggling caring for my child and getting my work done, to what is that thing sitting on the floor in Mark's office, which is really wonderful to see.
And it's how you keep that lightness at a time when people are worried is really important, isn't it? To be able to ask those questions with confidence. I was sat in a call the other day, and two people with completely different spaces. One was very Art Deco, and the other was very much child focused, and lots of child pictures, and it was just great to be able to see those contrasting whole selves, in one meeting space in a way which you'd never normally do. Can I just talk to you a little bit about flexible working, which is something you've championed at Salesforce for a long time, and so arguably perhaps are slightly more prepared than some organisations who've had fast-track course in flexible working. You talked a lot about trust in the previous question, which is absolutely key. But how do you make sure getting flexible working right at any time, but even more so at a time where, as you say, it's quite extraordinary and people are having to manage all sorts of things in their real life as part of their working day?
For sure. I think, the piece that goes along with trust is accountability. So we trust one another, but we're also accountable to one another. So how we get things done, and, values are one thing, but how you actually operationalize those and how you live them every moment. And we have that agreement, with our employees. And I know it's very hard for many people to make the leap from working in an office to working remotely. We have all now seen what this can be. We can't unsee it. So anyone who thought before that it's not possible to do job X, Y, or Z from home, I think we've disproved most of that. So really making sure that on the other end that you're accountable. And what we've seen over time too is, first of all, when you give employees permission and we give them that trust and are clear about the accountability, people step up, people rise up. People do this together as teams also. We've done a lot of work with our teams around fearless teaming, psychological safety. These are two topics that we know actually impact the bottom line. When you can get this right, this works. So some of that actually weaves into this. And again, that trust piece coming back, like where people can ask whatever they want, ask openly. And when our employees are asking questions to our executive team, we use our internal chatter tool. And people, they're not anonymous. We have ways in which people can actually ask questions anonymously, but it's incredible to see how many people actually post, and they post openly, and then people can kind of vote those up and down. In terms of what's asked. So it's the hard things, it's the easy things. But coming back to sort of this flexible work bit, we really understand that people have very different situations. And, there's a lot of focus on people that have to care for children at home and what that may be. There are also people who are alone, who are really isolated. So thinking about how do we meet those people where they are in their journey? And how do we give them space to take care of themselves? And one of the things that we did is we recognized that this is a really important piece that people need to take time for. And in these days that are back-to-back Zoom calls, when is the moment that I take time for myself? We've started twice a day well-being calls. They're 30 minutes, and we have different people on different days. Sometimes it's some of the monastics from Plum Village who are doing meditation with us. We've had Ariana Huffington on sharing the importance of getting enough sleep. We have different doctors who are talking about health, nutrition. We have a chef that comes on and talks about, how to cook with things you might have in your house. And it's reminding people that taking care of yourself is of utmost importance, and actually scheduling that into their day. And we hope this becomes more natural cadence for people, and they'll start to schedule that into their own day. But if we intentionally do that for people, we know that that's a big piece. And a lot of it, we also know that sort of still having fun and having camaraderie, having connectedness in a time where we're otherwise disconnected. But this is not just about this time. We're a global organization. As I said before, I'm used to working remotely from people. My team is all over the world. How do you maintain this connectedness? And that's, things that are virtual coffees, making sure we start calls by actually checking in on each other. And truly meaning it and asking this. So really encouraging people to take a break and remind them that we're all going through this same thing together.
It's one of the things which I think is really interesting, actually. I mean, I'm trying as much as possible to make calls 50 minutes rather than an hour. So there's a bit of a break in between, which I'm sure is something that lots of people are doing. But notice how much of the meeting is the checking in, and how, as long as you do that well, the business can be done actually much quicker, it seems. So a meeting might take the same amount of time, but actually the proportion of time spent on being human with each other and then fast tracking that business and still making good decisions feels to me, it seems to be something which is happening more and more.
And that's the piece that I want people to take out after this. How do you make sure, what are the habits, what are the things that we're learning this time that serve us really well in all times? And how do we make sure we are truly checking in on one another? Because, when I think about the time that we spend with our colleagues is far greater often than the time that we spend with our families, with our friends. And we have the ability to notice these small changes in one another that other people might not. And I love when I ask a person, how are you? And they'll say, well, you mean at work or personally? And I'm like, well, if one isn't working out, the other one's not working out either. So let's have the whole conversation. Talk to me about where things are. And, sort of this as work continues and thinking through, and the future of work is here. We've landed in it. This sort of work-life integration doesn't mean that you work more, that you spend more time being on. It's again about that authenticity and having those moments to step in and step out when you want to. And truly, if you're doing something that you're passionate about and you really love, and it feeds your salary, your soul, not just your salary, then you do stay connected to these pieces. But then you have to have that balance and how both things are working in both aspects of that life for that full human.
And do you think, you talked about we can't unsee this? Yeah. Do you think there are, if you were to look 6 months, 9 months, who knows how long ahead, do you think there are any things which are gone forever? The 9 to 5. What would your predictions be?
Yeah. No, I do have a few predictions here. I would say yes. The 9 to 5, unless that works for someone, in which case that's fine. I think this idea that you have to show up in person for a lot of internal meetings every day. We spend an enormous time as professionals meeting with each other. We have people who are commuting an hour and a half each way, so 3 hours a day to have internal meetings. How useful is that of that person's time? And imagine if we can give that 3 hours back to a person, what that could mean for them, how they would spend that. I think also this sort of equality of voice that happens when we're all separate and on a Zoom call. I'm often in a position where I'm the one person who sort of oversees, and I'm on a call with a bunch of other people who are sitting around a table somewhere in the US, and sort of having my voice heard can be tougher at certain moments. And what I've seen the shift, and I do think people will look to have more of that voice from each other and from the group that's there. And that actually makes a much richer conversation, and it makes for better business. And it really allows people to feel included. So we're so far away from each other and we feel isolated, and yet we're possibly more included than we've ever been before. I also see the sort of the level of gratitude that I'm seeing with people about things that are a bit more simple, and realizing also how important sort of kindness, compassion is in these moments, but is all of the time. We don't lose anything by taking the time to be kind and compassionate. And I also, the other prediction I have is that we'll be more present going forward as well. So that as individuals, when we can be together in person, that we'll really relish that time that we have with one another.
Which is interesting, of course, because without technology, this last month would have been very, very different. But actually, perhaps it had been intruding into our moments of being present with people a bit too much. And I certainly think there's some interesting ways. And you've obviously been a real champion of technology as a key way to improve employee experience in business. I guess it would just be interesting if you could just tell us a bit about how you've seen that, and whether you think this moment in time will amplify that within the business context, but whether it is going to shift any of our personal relationships as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it, that you use the word amplify, and technology needs to amplify sort of culture and how we work. It's not a replacement for it. It's those two things together, and also using data that you're able to have from technology that makes that really, really, really powerful. And, so we start with that piece around culture, but we're really intentional about this. And I'm really always urging businesses to think about that and think about, how they can operationalize their culture. What does this actually look like? What does this feel like? How do you action this piece? And And so we think about, as much time as you spend thinking about your products for your company or whatever that piece is, your customer experience. And my title is employee success. The same way that we think about making a customer successful, my team spends that time, that energy, and that technology making our employees successful. So how do you remove friction from experiences? And that's where technology can really have a big add. So, it can scale the culture. It doesn't create the culture, but it scales it. So we want to make sure our employees have this sort of consumer-like experience. And so often you sort of see this gap between how a person experiences their own life at home. On a normal day, I would get up and I brush my teeth with my Philips connected toothbrush, on an app, and I'll pre-order my coffee and my breakfast and pick it up along the way. Pick up my jump bike or get in my Uber through my phone, and then get to the office. And then so many people get to the office and they're then have a dongle or 56 different things they have to sign on, and they don't have the ability to really leverage technology. And then also that data piece that comes out of utilizing technology. So it's a very funny thing because people are this whole world where privacy is also important, and how do we sort of balance the tension between really the rich data that we have and what we can do with that versus the privacy that someone has. But when you are capturing data from technology, you're able to have insights and you're able to see changes. You're able to start to predict things. Think about a world where we can actually see change in employee behavior and understand if an employee is likely to be starting to burn out or have issues, what we could do, how we could intervene, how we can kind of get there before something happens. How can we nudge something so that it moves in the right way? So we really use a lot of different data sources. I talked about Chatter. I talked about our V2 Mom, our online learning, which is called Trailhead. And we make sure that we have really insightful information about our people. And then again, that piece on trust and transparency. We really make sure that we utilize technology to give transparency to our people and to make sure that they're sort of seeing that. We put them on journeys as if they are a customer. So a marketing journey, the same way if you were to go to a shop and buy something or buy online, and then you get an email a couple months later asking how you like your product, suggesting something else, et cetera. We can do this with our teams and with our people as well. We can put them on journeys, and whether that's about working towards a new role in the company, or whether that's with someone, we have some great journeys going on right now around meditation and mental health and wellness, where people could opt in for a 30-day journey to try to build habits around this. So that's some of the really wonderful ways that technology can sort of change a person's day, change a person's life, and make their life easier and better.
And that's one of the things which I know you talk a lot about personally, but also as a company. And you've got Ohana within Salesforce, and which is about psychological safety. You talked about having mental health first aiders. Can you just talk to us a bit about what Ohana means, why Salesforce has embraced the idea? Because at the heart of data and technology being used for good, you also talked about trust and accountability, and those all obviously come together to create that psychological safety.
And this Ohana piece, it sits really at the center of our culture and who we are. And the word actually means family, so it's a Hawaiian word. A lot of the roots of our company came from Mark's time, his experience in Hawaii, and how he experienced the world around him. And this is really about no one being left behind, and everyone is stood up by each other. So your Ohana, again, it's not the family you're born into necessarily. It's your community around you. It's your customers. It's your colleagues, etc. And how do we make sure that we have that responsibility to one another, that one would and hopefully does with their family as well. it allows us to then go into those things around psychological safety. Making sure that people have space to fail, to question, to learn, because this really adds to kind of the collective intelligence of the organization. And the safe place, speaking up. I talked about one of my values and one of my words being courage. There are a lot. There's a lot of bifurcation of opinions right now. That's the sort of downside of technology, when technology targets sort of your own biases, and you're then just fed more information that you believe in. But how do you have the opportunity to raise your voice and to share that opinion? I'm one of 5 children, and I explain this to my team often, where I said, like, we did not always get along. But you know what? At the end of the day, we all still had each other's backs. We debated things wholeheartedly. Google maybe has ruined that for us, because you used to actually be able to have a really brilliant dinner conversation and debate around some fact. Now we can look it up a little more readily. But how do we make sure that we give space to one another to be able to do this? And also, how do we make sure that our family, our ohana, is representative of what the world looks like, so that you're not only, again, feeding yourself with the same information, the same ideas, the same thoughts that other people have, that other like-minded people have, that people who are the same. So how do you make sure you're actually seeking out points of view that are different, and incorporating those and learning from those, and actually realizing how rich something is? So, we have employee resource groups, as many companies do, or quality groups, and such as, Outforce, which supports our LGBTQ community, Boldforce for our Black employees and allies. And really, these individuals are also helping make sure that our ohana really reflects what the world looks like, beyond the walls that we're used to seeing.
It's really interesting, actually. I was struck by talking about different points of view. We often talk about healthy conflict at work, and it just feels like it's the wrong terminology to have healthy and conflict together. It's actually just different ideas and different points of view, and if you can use them, whereas conflict tends to put us into that sort of negative frame of mind. So just think it's so important to have that diversity of view and of opinion and of experience in the room, in order to help have better ideas and be more innovative.
That's it. And that's, you hit on it right there too, that innovation. So, innovation doesn't happen without breaking things, without some conflict. And, really, I think really strong and great organizations, and I've seen this with some of our customers as well. There's some amazing examples of companies out there that have these tensions, and it's these pieces that are pulling up, that are pulling apart. But I almost think of this like rubber band stretched to the max, and it's kind of pulling it back together at the same time. And that's really something that makes us stronger. And I know it's funny because different cultures shy away from it in different ways. I worked for a French organization for 7 years, and it was a great exercise in learning debate. As a child in school, I was not to debate my teacher. In the French school system, you get a bit more of that. And there's a real level of comfort around a table oftentimes there where, it does. If the question is A or B, it doesn't really matter if you choose A or B. Just have a good case behind it, because someone else at the table is going to choose the other one, and you're going to have a really healthy debate. You may make a decision about 6 other things and not the thing you initially planned on. But again, the richness in conversation when there is diverse point of view and diverse thought makes it such a more interesting and a more innovative place at the end of the day.
And how in your experience have you seen that done best in terms of workplace cultures? Given that there is no perfect workplace culture, but how have you seen this done, best in your experience? Yeah,
I think again, it's coming back to the importance of being, again, intentional about that culture. It really needs to be actively defined. It doesn't just happen. And, putting formal processes in place, and my team knows this of me. I'm not a process person for process sake, but when it drives something and when it creates goodness, when it removes friction, when it opens doors, that's where you do that. So putting these really formal processes in place to foster, to promote cultural values. On the tension piece, it's again, how do we make sure we give examples? How do we actively show that as leaders, that this is okay and this is meaningful, this is important, and that we face them head on? Right now is a great time to even discuss with your colleagues, with your families, about some of the tensions that just exist in the world. We have a great tension between, in many cases, keeping everyone safe, and also the impact that this is going to have on certain businesses or economies. Like, we're not going to get both in this moment. So how do we think through how to debate that, how to make right decisions around those pieces? I would also say, that, is there a perfect culture? Every culture is different because we're humans. We're all going to be different, and the sum of those parts are never going to be the same. That's the beauty of it. But thinking about making sure that things are deeply, deeply rooted in equality. When I talked about, making sure that things have processes behind them, we have deep commitment to equal rights, equal pay, equal education, equal opportunity. And we actively engage on those constantly. And that shows our employees that this is important. When we're interviewing people, we're asking about those pieces, asking about those things, and making sure they're there. And this is really, really essential to make sure that it's defined as a goal, and it's not just sort of taken for granted. And it really takes constant focus, constant adjustment, and from the top down, but also in every single part of our organization. And it's important that we each are accountable for also calling each other out when we're not living up to that. So going back to the Ohana, when you're not living up to your part of your role in the family, and everyone has their role and everyone's contributing, that you actually say, hey, no, that's not who we are, and being accountable for that and accountable to one another.
And I know that you have very passionately driven and talked about more women in tech, and clearly that also extends to all groups of people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily be represented within the tech industry and other sectors. I'm sure you'd feel as passionately about it being across all sectors. But
sure.
How far... where have you seen most progress, and where do you think there is still much more to be done?
Yeah, oh gosh, it's one of those topics that there's never a finish line for this, because as the world sort of shifts around us, this always changes. And I've seen progress. I've seen progress within our own organization. I've seen progress in other organizations in the world, but I also see where we take step backs. And I was actually just reading a book called Invisible Women, and it's one of those things that, it's such a wonderful book, and it makes me so angry at the same time, because you see actually how data has actually excluded certain populations, and decisions are made based on data. And then without that data on those people, you actually are making the wrong decisions for the people that they impact. We've definitely seen movement, and I think this piece again about transparency is important. And more governments are forcing levels of transparency around gender diversity, around pay fairness. For us, it was a really important topic on equal pay. And several years ago, my former boss, the lovely Cindy Robbins, approached Mark Benioff, our CEO, and said, hey, I think there might be an issue. I think we might not have fair pay. He kind of responded saying, yeah, of course we do. This is part of who we are. But made a commitment that we're going to take a look at the data and see what the answer is and correct it if it wasn't. So we did at that period of time, and then we did in subsequent years. And, we used to actually separate out how we talked about, this is your increase and this is your equal pay adjustment if there was a variance. And it's actually become such a part of our culture and such a part of our processes. So we're actually checking this at every single moment and thinking about how do we drive this? How do we make sure that there's parity, that there's pay fairness? Gender is one lens, looking through underrepresented minorities. And, are we doing that? Are we taking that lens as well? I think it's also really important from a gender standpoint that young women have role models that they can relate to, that they can aspire to be. And they really need to see these women represented across all levels, different achievements. The tech industry, I know, is always put in a hard place and given a black mark for the work done there. We've done a lot of work around bringing in female leaders and developing our own. So it's a combination of the two. We have a program called Future Force where we're starting with people right out of university, and we're having gender balanced classes or even greater. We had one of our classes in the UK. They tend to range in about the 70% of them are women. And this is choosing the best candidates. It's not about having a quota. It's about making sure we look at a diverse pool and choose the best folks each time. And then if you can grow your culture, grow your population through the ranks and make sure you don't attrit and don't lose them, and how do we keep them then, you're able to see change long term. And that's one of the key things. I think it's easy to say, okay, we're going to make this extreme choice and we're going to do this and we're going to, push for this number of people, et cetera. But you have to make active changes that are going to, you're in it for sort of the marathon, not just the sprint. And, it might not push the needle that much in year 1 or year 2, but if you replicate this every year for the next 10 years, what does that look like and what future are you building for the people around you? But again, using data is very important there. The numbers don't lie, and how do we make sure we're actually showing this and having conversations about it and are each accountable for what we shape and what we bring in the organization.
And talking of being in it for a marathon, not a sprint, Audre Lorde talked about self-care being an important part of self-preservation. How do you look after yourself? Particularly with a global role, different time zones. How do you make sure that you get your self-care practices in? You talked, as we were beforehand, about your daily walk at the moment.
Yeah. So, I think I had to learn how to become disciplined around self-care and actually build it into my day, schedule it into my day. I work through multiple time zones. So if I didn't take care of it, I could be working from 5 a.m. until 11 at night, just getting through all the time zones. So I actively schedule my weeks so that I have a couple days that are my early days with my team in APAC and Japan, days that I more focus on San Francisco, so they go later into the evening. But then personally, right now, yes, it's about my walk every day, and I actually cherish this. My sister is staying here with me in isolation. We isolated together instead of doing it 3,000 miles apart, and we take that time and we just discover new streets every day. I'm a person who deeply believes that, and I know that my physical health very, very much impacts my mental health. So normally I would be in a class every day, whether it's Orange Theory, Barry's Boot Camp, a bar class, whatever that may be. I don't have that right now, so I'm using I have a Peloton. I'm on my Peloton every day, and there's actually great social parts for that. I have people who are on my team who also are Peloton owners, and we follow what each other is doing. I have my Apple Watch on me. With my team, I also, we track each other and we cheer each other on in terms of our fitness, but I literally schedule that into my day. And I'm also very thoughtful, especially at a time like this when it can be stressful about eating as well. And, I'm having food delivered every day for my sister and I, where someone actually preps our meals. which means that A, I'm keeping a company that I really love in business during this time. B, I'm getting really well prepared things that are going to give me energy, that are going to keep me well. And C, I don't have to, fight over groceries with people who need them every day over Waitrose down the street from me. I'm also, it's about finding times to connect with my family, with my friends, and questioning also, why am I not doing this all of the time? And also finding, simple moments of joy in the day. On a walk last week, there was an Italian cafe that had takeout that was open. I needed to grab something for Easter dinner, and their coffee counter was open. And I got an iced coffee and a pastry. And it seemed like such a deep luxury. And I realized how many moments that I've let happen that I just take for granted. So it's, again, like taking a moment to reflect on, like, this is a gorgeous moment. And this is great. And that's one of the things I want to make sure that I carry forward as we come out of this too. Just really experiencing great joy from simple things.
That feels like a really good place to end our first Zoom podcast, I think, doesn't it? Because actually, as you say, that bit of moving forward, we must never just go back, and how we take those moments of joy, how we recognise the power that is within us feels incredibly important. So thank you very much for spending some time with me this morning, and I'm hoping that it's all recorded well and that we'll be able to publish next week. So it's been a real pleasure. Thanks very much.
Sounds great. It's been a pleasure, and may we all bounce forward from this. It's not about bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So that was my conversation with Linda. It was an absolute pleasure, and there were so many great ideas that we can all take away and think about for our own workplaces. In particular, I liked when Linda talked about decisions. We may not get all of them right at the moment, and that's okay, because we will learn and adapt. Something I think we can all agree will help us through this particular period in time. That's the end of the second series of Just About Coping. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you to Dara, Nat, Ada, Mike, Carl and Linda for their time and their expertise. I hope that you've enjoyed the series, and we'd love to hear from you. You can rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and many other podcast platforms. Do join in the conversation with the hashtag #JACPodcast. Like a lot of things at the moment, we're going to be pausing Just About Coping for a while and having a think about what our next series may look like in this rapidly changing world. A reminder that if you're working from home, there are lots of resources available on our website for both looking after yourself and your team. We'll be back soon, but for now, I'm Simon Blake, and thanks for coping with us.